just to set the context for this discussion, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on some of the fundamental trends in retail that are really shaping some of what we're going to talk about today. And I think there's 5 things that seem to be common between all of the retailers that we've spoken to. The first, which we spoke about extensively in the previous session, is just changing customer experiences. And I think you could historically think of a trade-off between customers who sought value for money, for instance, versus others who sought variety, personalization. I think increasingly that line is starting to blur, and everybody expects a certain level of service, personalization, and so on. So obviously customers becoming more demanding. We've also seen omni-channel as a way of then serving those customer experiences become significantly more real, come to life. And the expectation is then that the retailer has an understanding of you across multiple touch points. So from when they're coming to the website to when they then walk into the store to then how you stay connected with the consumer post the transaction. There is an expectation of a seamless single view of the consumer that I think makes things a little bit more interesting. The third is just the disruption that's being caused across multiple industries by digital natives. And we spoke a lot, amongst this group as well before the panel about the advantages that incumbent brands and retailers have, but still the agility that digital natives are bringing to the table. And therefore the kind of requirements that everybody has to really step up. Fourth is, of course, retail's always been a thin margin business. It's always been important to optimize multiple variables. And I think those pressures of just finding the money, keeping margins healthy is, still continue to remain. And finally, this is more, the last one is more an observation from what we've seen globally, not yet that much in India, apart from a few consumer groups, which is just questions around sustainability of business practices, the environment, especially in the context of fashion, whether you're really running business models that will stand up against some of those tests. So I think it is a challenging and interesting environment within which to think of some of the discussions we're going to have today. And obviously, there have been a whole range of areas where retailers are investing from a technology standpoint. I think it spans the spectrum from, let's say, marketing optimization and e-commerce, which a number of the retailers that we've spoken to are now starting to consider more table stakes. Going all the way to the other end of saying, do you have a single view of the customer, a truly single view of the customer? Are you truly able to enable personalization? And do you actually have the operational backbone to be able to support those kinds of experiences? And this is where I think we're starting to see more of a divergence open up between different cohorts of retailers. So with that as the context, I'd love to start to invite all of our panelists, maybe starting with you, Bharati, since you're right at the head of this group. What are the, from both a customer as well as business perspective, what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing in the retail landscape, and therefore, what are the areas that you're seeing retailers make the biggest investments in technology today?
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. It's great to be here amidst all of you. We have a unique vantage point at Shopify. We see the entire spectrum of entrepreneurs all the way from what we call hello to IPO. I think there's a couple of big themes we're seeing now, 1 year out of COVID, which obviously was very good for us in terms of how we grow our business. I think the number one thing we're seeing is among consumers, like they've adopted all the habits of what they saw as they took to online, offline as well, right? So instant gratification, I want it quickly, I want to have a personal experience, I want to see if there's a sale or not. Those expectations are seeping into other channels for sure. That's one. The other really exciting consumer trend to me personally, and I've seen this for a while across China and now India, is honestly where consumers spend time is where they spend their money. But the thing is that now where consumers spend time is very, very fragmented increasingly. So it's not about your website being a shop as well. It's not just about also selling online. It's actually about when your consumers discovering you on WhatsApp or YouTube or Instagram or what have you, are you there? If he's standing at a signal, looks at a hoarding, he's going to go Google, then check if that particular product that the model's wearing on the hoarding is available in the store near you and decide whether he or she wants to come into the store over the weekend. So you really have to be where the consumer is spending time. So fragmented demand is a real challenge that technology can solve today and has to be something you keep in mind more and more going forward. On the business side, I think supply chains, COVID's taught us, like you've got to be agile, you've got to be supple, you've got to be quick, but also the amount of consumer feedback feeding into the supply chain is transformational now. Nothing is a one-way street, right? So when you decide assortment, I see young digital native brands, they actually go to Instagram and seek feedback before they drop something, before they even take it to production. Or they're going and studying their competitors' reviews on marketplaces and saying, oh, what is the exact feature weakness? And can I fix this with my product and then take it to market? They're doing drops in certain cities before they extend to other channels. They're experimenting with their brand.com to put out new assortment before they take it to other channels, which are actually, the majority of their business. So I think supply chain is another theme on the business side. And the last one, I'd say very early, more something we're seeing globally, is where e-commerce penetration has grown a lot, like categories like mobile phones, electronics. The idea of what your retail store should be is changing quite a bit. Of course, we see this also with influencer-led brands, celebrity brands, anime brands in Japan, but also with a lot of traditional established sports brands. Because so much of what they're doing is being bought online, they're able to sort of reimagine what they should do with their stores. Less of it yet in India, but I think that's also something to think about as we go forward.
Yep. Thanks for that setup. I think you've covered a lot of ground there. So I'm going to toss it to Ranjan maybe, because as bestseller, you're running a whole range of fast fashion brands. How is all of what Bharati said actually playing out in the context of your brands as well, and what are the investments you're making?
Thanks, Radhika. I think from bestseller brands, if you look at, we are catering to very, very young customers to slightly matured customers as well. So the brands range between maybe solving a problem for a 4-year-old kid to maybe a 16-year-old girl to 22-year or 25 years old guy to maybe a 45-year-old person as well. And the challenges are very, very different, because when you start catering to each of these age groups, they come with their different nuances. The problems that we are trying to solve today is, if you look at the way how things have shaped up, and especially the way how the customers have started becoming demanding. We originally were a brick and mortar retail brand, and then a few years back we took the plunge into e-commerce, because we said, as a philosophy for our brands, we will be there wherever our customers are. And that's the backbone of our decision in terms of saying, since we cannot open stores in every nook and corner of the country, in spite of having about 350 plus stores across the country, maybe 1,650 plus shop-in-shops in the country, we still feel there's a large area that is missing in the country. And how do you penetrate that market? That's where technology started playing a role in terms of commerce. But then keeping commerce and retail separate was not a choice. You had to bring them together because the consumer was the same. There's a lot of overlap in the consumer, and the consumer is expecting whatever I just heard. I think it's a nuance of the not only the evolved countries, but also a country like India, where we in retail, in some of the areas we are still ahead from a lot of the evolved countries as well. The way how omnichannel penetration is picking up, the way how pressures for optimizing your inventory and supply chain, that's a very large piece that one has to solve for. And technology is playing a role in all of this. It is starting, for us, it is starting at the point of time when we are spotting a trend, because we are a fast fashion brand. When do you spot a trend? What trend is going to make sense for you? Because not every trend is going to work for you. It might not fit into your DNA. So being able to understand that, bringing in technology play there, and then being able to merge that with your merchandising plan, from your sourcing plan, and especially when you have your supply chain which is spread across multiple countries, you also need to be wary about the lead times. We don't have the luxury of spotting a trend today and being able to convert that trend into into a finished products in maybe 15, 20 days, though the aspiration still stays there. That's what we would want to do. But doing that is far, far easier than actually done. Because in many of the cases, the lead time or the supply chain itself could be almost about 3 to 6 months, depending on where you're sourcing from, what kind of products you're buying, and what kind of products you're manufacturing. So bringing in technology to be able to solve problems around each of these areas from a supply chain perspective, from a design perspective, from bringing, and also being able to bring in that input from a consumer to be able to bring the designer into that entire play in terms of saying, this is why, and this is what the consumer is needing, and especially from an Indian context where colors could vary every 100 kilometers, the need of color, the sizing parameters could vary every 200 kilometers. It becomes all the more difficult in the size and the color combination. And that's where technology is trying to solve many of these areas. And I said there are certain key areas that we focused on, especially in the space of design and merchandising. But a large part of it is being solved through technology in terms of analytics and data. Data is the biggest core piece which is going to solve all of this, because that's where, as long as you know about things, you will be able to solve it. You will be able to find answers to it.
Yeah, thanks, Ranjan. And I'll come back subsequently to some of the points that you raised about tech in the supply chain in particular. Praveen, you, as part of ABFRL, are actually running a business with very diverse brands in different stages of their evolution, catering to different kinds of consumers, different online, offline mixes, and so on. What are the biggest areas that you are, seeing investment happening?
So I think probably retail is one of the most digitally disrupted industry, probably after maybe financial services, right, or fintech. So tech is everywhere in retail. I mean, at least for us, almost in every touch point to the consumer, tech is playing a role and has to continue to play a role and has to continue to refine that role. And obviously, we have great examples to follow worldwide in terms of how we go about it. Similarly, on the supply chain, I mean, fashion retail in itself is such a complex problem, right? It is you don't have a product that is it's not a consumer product which will stay and you're building a brand and that will last years. Yes, you're building a brand, but then your product is changing every few months, sometimes every month. So given that, how do you really do the entire supply chain from the point of designing, deciding on what to make, how much to make, where to sell, and how much to sell, right? Given that you're also operating on multi-channels, whether it is your own stores, department stores, online. So it's a very complex problem, and all of these need technology. Now, it's only a question of where the prioritization moves. And I think from an industry perspective, there's no process or there's no customer touch point that technology hasn't touched. For an organization, it's a choice, or for a business within an organization, it's a choice as to where you start first and where you do later. Now, clearly, initially, a few years back, pre-COVID, a lot of the focus was more on the back end because largely online was still a very small percentage of our business. Through COVID, the focus completely shifted to investing on the customer front end because the entire business shifted from offline to online, and you have to very rapidly enable online. And what needs to be enabled online has, again, a large bearing on the back end because it was not just about making what you had in the warehouse online, you also needed to make what's in stores online because in fashion, 80% of your new season inventory is going to sit in stores. Nobody's going to keep it in the warehouse. So if you're not able to enable your online channel to get service from stores, you're not going to be able to give the right product on your online channel at all. So those major transformations on the front end is what came about in the last 4 years, and the focus was very much there. I mean, getting the front end right. And again, a lot of innovation there. We recently launched one multi-brand app, which is in a way the first of its kind, where we conceived a model where we will not go for create a new brand for a marketplace or but simply have each brand and have some kind of a easy switch for the consumer between brands. And it's an experiment that we are piloting. So you have to think of new concepts. How do you really present it to the customer online, and how do you link it back offline? Because for us, in the offline world, each brand is a competitor to each other. I mean, Van Heusen and Louis Philippe don't collaborate when it comes to the offline world. But on the online, we have brought them on one platform. So how to enable those journeys more seamless online, still be able to get integrated between online and offline, and work for the brand individually, given their different market segments and different objectives, is going to be a challenge. And the only way to solve it is in technology. And as what we have to really look at is how we deal with this with data analytics, your supply chain automation, front-end automation, tracking customer journeys, online, offline. So all the technology elements come into play when you're looking at those categories.
Thanks, Praveen. Raj, similar question to you as well. Just as you look at metro brands, rapidly growing again, also significant presence online and offline. What are the big investments that you're making?
Hi. So I think COVID really brought into the forefront, that one has to invest in good technology, not just to survive, but also to thrive. And that story keeps continuing, right? In general, in the industry, one sees technology getting adopted everywhere, be it the front end, the back end, right? For example, everybody is focused now on e-commerce and omni-channel, right? So we are also focused in that particular area. We operate 7 of our own brand sites in tandem with operating on third-party marketplaces, right? We are still traditionally an offline company, right? With operating about 720 plus stores across the country. Now, when one sees in terms of tech investment, one has to always remember that while one might want to boil the ocean, one has to really pick up which battle one wants to fight at any point of time. The key thing in technology investment is both people, process, and technology, right? And your margins can really be hit if you invest in the wrong technology. And today, with a strong ecosystem in place of both service providers and not just software as a service, but results as a service, one should always look at aiming for ensuring that one goes for shorter term contracts with flexibility to move out in either direction. Now, that being said, yeah, we continuously invest in technology. For example, not just from a point of view of back-end, front-end, e-commerce, personalization, or analytics, etc., but also in our core products. For example, we have a concept store called BioFoot. I would encourage everybody to visit it. It's in Kulaba, right? Wherein we create custom insoles, which are 3D printed. You walk into the store, we will scan your feet, okay, and give you a report as to what are the deviations from the deemed normal, if I may say so, right? And how we can help you through custom inserts or 3D printed insoles, etc. So I would, and that's quite an exciting area where, with that technology, you personalize to a target audience of one, right? It's something like one of the paint company had said, Mera wala cream, right? So sky's the limit as far as that is concerned. But there's a strong focus also on optimizing of inventory. And that's a common focus area, I think, across all the retailers out here. And a lot can be done out there if we can do better demand forecasting. For example, today, typically a forecasting is done using historical data and certain algorithms. With large language models coming in, right? Can we get additional external, I would say, unstructured input to figure out trends or area-specific trends and optimize on the same? Thank you.
Thanks, Raj. I think you've actually opened up a few questions that we'll definitely get back to further in the conversation. Rajiv, you have an interesting view of both what's happening in India as well as what's happening in other parts of the world. What do you think are the sets of things that Indian retailers in particular are need to be thinking about more closely, just given our current operating environment?
So I'll talk in the context of what we see globally, right? At Walmart, we actually have a very simple purpose, and that purpose is to essentially save time and money for our customers so that they can live better every day, right? And everything that we do, whether it is with respect to experience, supply chain, merchandising, pricing, is in the context of that, which is everyday low price, everyday low cost, and convenience for the customer, right? Now we really have stopped looking at retail as traditional retail, e-commerce, etc. So while Walmart is the largest retailer in the world, we are also one of the largest marketplaces, right? So retail is now become an ecosystem play, which is essentially you're not only looking at the consumer, but you're looking at enabling a large set of sellers on your platform. You're looking at large set of service providers that provide different kinds of services. It could be logistic services, it could be other after-sale services, and enabling them on your platform, right? So that's essentially the context, and that's where retail is evolving from a very command and control kind of a structure to a very market and market-driven, market dynamics-driven kind of a type of setup. We have approximately 240 million transactions per week across our 20 markets, about 10,500 physical stores, 20 plus e-commerce properties in different markets. And then we serve all different types of merchandise, right? Full range grocery. We have general merchandise, which includes entertainment like electronics, toys, games. We have home, we have hard lines, and then health and wellness. Now, there are macro trends and then secular trends, right? The macro trends are typically driven by the economy, events like COVID, etc. So the current trend is around food inflation globally. There is obviously a lot of pressure, and consumers are being very thoughtful in terms of discretionary spend. So for high consideration categories, what is it that retailers need to do to nudge the customer and have them convert, right? What is it that they need to do to provide customers that confidence to do that spend? On the secular trend, it is very clear. India moved actually from after the 3G and 4G revolution, we moved directly to mobiles, right? The developed markets actually were on desktops with broadband connections. And I think in the last 2 or 3 years, essentially that world has also moved to mobiles and the app world. That conversion is complete. And that provides a very different way in which retailers need to engage with customers in terms of experiences. A desktop experience and a mobile experience is very different. Consumers, right, whether they want to, we look at journeys in 3 phases, right? There is discovery, there is the actual shopping, and then there is fulfillment. And consumers these days want to essentially engage with retailers or marketplace platforms in a very different way. Some of them, there are clear cohorts. Some of them want to engage in the discovery process physically, complete the fulfillment digitally. Some of them want to essentially do the reverse, which is discover digitally, purchase also digitally, and have fulfillment done physically. So there's just different ways in which they want to engage, and we need to be able to do that using technology. There is an adoption of all of these new concepts is scaling up very fast. So anything that we launched an AR capability of Be Your Own model that just gives you a changing room experience for our apparel category. And the adoption that we saw for that was just phenomenal, right? I mean, typically it takes time for you to see adoption of a few million customers adopting something like that over a period of quarters. This just is now so viral, and it just happens so quickly. And then in terms of fulfillment, again, it's very, very fragmented as was discussed earlier. Some customers essentially want things delivered to their doorstep within 30 minutes, right? Some customers are comfortable with a scheduled approach. And then some customers essentially want things delivered in their refrigerator, right? So that's also something that's happening in the developed markets. So again, as retailers, you want to be able to do all of this, and it completely depends on your customer base and how they want it, right? So all the things that you build and develop using technology has to be in the context of where the market is and what the customers want and what technology allows you to enable.
Thanks for that, Rajiv. So I think one of the common themes that's obviously emerged from all of this is both fragmentation of needs as well as fragmentation in terms of where people actually expect the product to be delivered to them. So there's both of that happening, which then actually brings me to a couple of related questions on, let's call it the core merchandise planning, demand forecasting, demand sensing even before that. and then inventory deployment questions. And that's obviously very core to what any retailer is going to be looking at. I want to put out two sets of questions, and feel free to answer whichever or both. The first is, obviously these are very core systems to any retailer, especially anybody who's been established for a while. There are obviously existing systems and approaches. And, there is a question of how you change if necessary. How do you think about pulling out what already exists, putting in new investments if necessary? So I'd love to, get your thoughts on how you're seeing that play out. The second is, we've spoken in conceptual terms about, new data being available, whether, Raj, it's at the level of the individual, like the example you spoke about, or, Ranjan, you spoke about, picking up trends in a much faster fashion. So all of this new data, as well as the tools that are available, are you actually seeing them make material differences to the outcomes that ultimately you're trying to drive, whether it is the inventory in the system, the ability to drive sell-through, the ability to, to increase the velocity of what you're bringing to the market and so on. I'll start with you, Ranjan, since you teased some of these questions early on.
Sure. So I think picking up the trend, so I'll pick up from where I left the last time, and it's about, from a fashion perspective, one of the first things that you start putting your money, or the biggest bet that you put is on the product. And when do you identify your trend? You need to localize it to your environment. You need to normalize and figure out how this is going to make sense in your ecosystem with your set of consumers that you're doing. And then your demand planning, which started much later in terms of, generally, in terms of saying how much do you want to sell. It starts from how many, because the option planning itself has changed today. How many options you would want to deliver will depend largely in terms of saying what are the trends you are spotting, how many different products you would want to bring in, and when do you want to kill them. Because it's also important not just about adding a new product, but also killing them and getting out of those products or replacing those products timeliness. Then the other piece that you need to solve is around, from a demand forecasting, especially if I look at, is in terms of figuring out, and this was, though we had the core systems in terms of figuring out where do you need to place your inventory, but that was largely to do from an ecosystem of stores that you had. And that was more native to the nature of the customers who were walking into that. And you pretty much had a sense in terms of saying, if I have a store in Bangalore versus if I have a store in Delhi, these are the different trends, or these are the different nature of customers who are going to walk into my stores. With digital becoming so much more prominent, and the customer could be sitting anywhere, and there could be a Delhi customer who could be sitting in Bangalore and could be ordering that same product there, and he might be looking for that same product there maybe in a few hours. You will have to start factoring in those factors as well, which was never there. So now the placement of the inventory itself has become a much larger issue. And not just into your own stores, but also being able to fulfill them, because you cannot fulfill everything from your stores. It's a very, very expensive real estate. One has to keep in mind that the cost of fulfillment is going to start going through the roof. In the initial phases, you might find that it is helping you in terms of improving your sell-throughs. It is helping you in terms of being able to sell out more merchandise, push out more merchandise from the stores, but it is creating different kinds of problems in terms of when the customer walks in, maybe a hero product is a hero product everywhere in all channels. That product would have been sold from that, maybe sold to a customer who was never there in that store, but you've actually shipped it out from that store. And when the customer walks in, one of the big difference between when a customer walks into a store and when a customer is actually going digital in any of your digital channels is he needs the product there and then. Half of the time he's not even willing to wait for a 2-hour or a 4-hour delivery when he's walking into a store, because he's taken that pain to come to your store. And when you do not have that merchandise available, half of the time the customer will come back and tell you, I don't want it. Maybe I buy an alternate product, or he's going to walk out of your store and go to some other competition brand to buy that product. How do you solve for that? I think it's very early days. We're still trying to solve a lot of these problems, and these optimizations are humongous in nature, because the amount of data that we have today with different kind of data sets, different kind of search capabilities, and the search data itself is such a rich data that you have today. It's all boiling down to in terms of you becoming your demand planning cycle becoming shorter and shorter every day. Gone are the days when you would plan, when you do your planning a year ahead, 6 months ahead. Maybe now it's all about weekly. We are getting into a cycle of saying, instead of 2 seasons that we normally used to have, say a spring, summer and an autumn, winter, and a lot of fashion retailers would split that further into spring and summer and autumn and winter. We are breaking it down into 12 months. Now we are saying 12 months is, we will be running 12 seasons, which means that we will have 12 months. Each of these months are going to be each season. And we will have to buy for them, we will have to sell within them, and we will have to figure out how do we liquidate if something is not selling and getting rid of it. We will have to eventually reach to weeks. That's the endeavor. Because it's only then that you will be able to find the right mix in terms of your demand planning and your forecasting methodologies in terms of saying, how can you become so more accurate to be able to say, if a product is supposed to be launched in say, 7th week of the year, when is it, and what is the shortest possible time when you can manufacture that product, get it into your value chain, and be able to deliver that product either to your store, and imagine it's not about launching a product in one channel anymore. It's about launching everywhere, which means that if you have to launch a product digitally, there are so many more activities that are involved in terms of launching a product. The whole notion of the catalog, the whole notion of the shoot, the product shoot itself, and the content being available, all of that adds up to the lead time, and that is where the efficiency has to start coming in, and you have to start budgeting and planning for all of that in terms of your planning process, in terms of your merchandising process as well, and also this will lead back in terms of products. Life cycles have to be shortened from our kind of products, the fast fashion space that we are into. We are trying to shorten the life cycle of product rather than taking big bet on a single product, because you have to minimize your risks as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ranjan. Praveen, Ranjan spoke about some of the complexity involved in optimization and ensuring that your product is everywhere, being able to service these multiple channels. From your perspective, which of these problems do you think is, has a more defined solution that you've cracked, and what do you think are the big open questions out there that still need to be addressed?
Yes, I think the whole demand and supply planning, right? It's a complex problem, especially in fashion. As I said earlier, that the very fact that your product changes every few months, you can't really, the traditional models of demand forecasting all don't work across categories. Now, we do have certain categories, let's say we do innerwear as well. So there we have more traditional demand forecasting solutions put in place, we have implemented, and it's working reasonably well. The other place is, you have to make a trade-off between where you will you'll focus more on automation, and in order to squeeze the supply chain, be better at reflecting your demand moves into your supply, and making your manufacturing or purchasing more agile, right? So those kind of technologies. Vis-a-vis doing more on the analytics and algorithm side, where you try to be better at your ability to forecast, right? Category. Now, obviously, fast fashion, the trend is moving more towards the former, right? I mean, Shein is obviously the biggest example. They have gone and just squeezed the supply chain to the point where I don't care. I just sense it soon, react quickly, deliver to the customer. If the trend changes tomorrow, fair enough. I don't carry too much inventory, I have a problem. But not all, it's not fast fashion. In our case, again, we work across categories, where the trend is very, very, very different. So you may not necessarily move to a cycle of weekly or monthly drops in all cases. But in those cases, again, then the problem shifts to, maybe you can't forecast demand, but let's say in menswear, the change is not that much when it comes to the fabric. So you try to do your forecasting more at a fabric level and delay conversion to garment and focus around how to put technology to make that better. right? No replenishment. I mean, clearly in a store network, last year we have like 3,000 stores. So, and store has a finite capacity in terms of what merchandise they can hold. So having, and out of your entire option, what product should sit where, in what size sets, so that solving the two problems. One is making sure that when the customer walks in, they have the product that they are expecting to see. And second, also being able to service that product for your online channel. So the replenishment, the part is one where we have invested a lot, because that is something which we can tightly control, and we can move our supply chain where we do daily drops to stores, so that depending on what's moving, accordingly, do the right replenishment. Markdown is the other area. I mean, you can't do too much on predicting demand, but then can you react faster in terms of pricing to you liquidate inventory faster? So that's the area we are investing. So those are the areas that you have to deal, and again, they vary based on the category, based on the brand and its customer base.
Thanks, Praveen. So very interesting, and I love the way you actually laid out these two different approaches. I mean, you either try and figure out what is going to sell, or do you figure out how to very quickly deliver whatever you've identified as the signal? On that, Bharati, I mean, you've got obviously this wonderful vantage point of being able to, at least on the former side, I think, just get a sense of what's likely to trend, what's likely to move, and so on. And so as you've looked at all of the brands on your platform, or any other interesting brands out there, what are the most interesting things that you're seeing brands do in terms of solving this problem of quickly getting a sense of what is likely to move, and then reacting to that?
Yeah, on that particular thing, I think the D2C first brands do a really good job of finding new sources of information that tell them what the consumer is looking for. So, I remember there used to be a beauty brand that's now sold in India, but that founder would every month go on Instagram and do a live session saying, hey, I'm planning to launch this product. This is what it does. What do you think about it? Give me feedback. Do a live session. Should that be the only form of input? Absolutely not. But is it an important, current, relevant form of input? Yes. Things like, I'm sure now you could look at search keywords on marketplaces, and that informs what's a trend. I've been in the fashion business before I came to the platform side, and one of the things we'd look at is, designer kurtis are now trending. What does a designer kurti mean? I don't know. I would go to the brand and say, hey, what should we do about this? Or it's turquoise this season and not blue. It's not teal either. So can you help me put some stuff out? And also being agile and not assuming then that that's going to work, right? And setting up your supply to say, I can try something and then manufacture more of it. So definitely, I think being open-minded to the sources of input in driving what is forecasting demand is very important. But I do want to go back to, I think from our vantage point, I've seen, I do want to share 3 lessons on how to think about technology, because where I sit, it feels like being a bit like a kid in a candy store, right? Every day there's something new thrown at you, AR, VR, AI, ML, I can't keep up. There's 3 things I've learned. One is, I think today, no one company or technology solves for everything. That day is over. There was this famous line about, no one fired you for getting X. Those days are over. Change is so high. It is the new normal. Innovation is so fast that you have to live with the complexity of a tech stack that comes together. So don't think that tomorrow you have to overhaul like whatever you've built. You have to take it piece by piece and do the most relevant thing. Which brings me to the second thing. No one ever solved everything on day 0. I tell brands all the time, like get your basics right first, and then you can run a bunch of experiments when you have the time. Start with your online site never goes down. Let's start there. Start with pricing and promotions being the same across channels, or make that decision as a brand. Who do you want to be? Start with your content and catalog being agile for the new world. You may have lived with putting a prototype with 4 attributes in your ERP because that was enough for offline. But the moment you come online today, there are 60 attributes and then 10 more that are derived based on some trends and some logic that you want to convince the customer to buy. So stick to the basics, get basic things right. And both of these are not enough, and nothing with technology is enough if you don't plan for how your organization and how your operations change. So I actually was running several e-commerce businesses during COVID, and I learned these lessons the hard way. I'll give you a simple example in omni-channel that brings this to life, right? So ship from store. There's a wonderful red kurti sitting on a mannequin in the store. It's size S. Someone online saw it and decided to buy it. But no one in the store has thought they're going to ship the kurti on the mannequin, right? Or there's another size S that's torn and in the back store, but it shows up as inventory. In the store, you pick it up, call Chotu and say, put it in the corner, and we'll figure it out when stock count happens 15 days from now. You don't have that luxury if you start shipping from the store. So if your store team doesn't buy into online mattering, making a difference to their lives, no amount of technology is going to result in an improvement in sales and profitability. So I always say to teams, yes, you want to ship from store, you want to get to customers in 4 hours. You don't need to light up all your 10 stores in Bombay. Start with 2, the smartest store managers, get everything right. Think about why you need the third. Are you going to ship in 30 minutes? No. So why don't you just ship from 2 stores, right? So just pace yourself. Nothing's happening in a day. No one built a brand in a day. So those are my 3 lessons that I just wanted to leave everyone with.
Yeah, thanks. Well said, Bharati. Raj, if I were to pull you in on this, firstly, any reflections? I mean, I'm sure you've also had a very similar set of lessons. And specifically on the question of, tech choices as well, what do you pull out? Bharati referenced the complexity of tech stacks and so on. What's your experience been?
So the way I look at tech stack is that it's a discipline and it's a sustained effort. It takes a village to raise a child. The same is true for a tech stack, right? While everybody around you might get excited about this, great new technology out there, please realize that it's not just the technology. That won't solve anything for you, right? It'll make things easy, but the discipline in terms of processes and people who operate that is most important. Like everybody might claim we'll give you one view of inventory, and one view of inventory is very important, especially in retail industry, wherein you have both offline and online channels, right? However, you might have a system in place that gives one view of inventory. You might have a software or an order management system that intelligently routes orders, right? Is the person on ground bought in on that particular theory? Is someone in the shop, right, whose day in, day out processes are to serve a customer, him or her, whoever walks into the store at the highest priority? But if I'm doing omni-channel sales, especially with third-party marketplaces, you have certain time periods in which the pickup person will come, right? So there has to be a discipline over there. So that there's a tremendous, it's like commando training, right? You do years of training and that execution is over in 15 minutes or whatever, right? So that discipline is most important. That is one key learning. In any industry, especially in retail, there is no compression algorithm for experience. Yeah, I buy that. However, today there is technology and how agile you are in adopting a particular technology determines how you can accelerate your learning, right? While experience is there, there is also an opportunity to accelerate your learnings to test hypothesis basis data and take a more informed decision. That is the second key learning over there. So, agility in execution, both in technology and in product development. Today there is enough technology wherein you can give it images and say, for example, create an apparel of this particular theme and it will throw up designs. We are not spoiled for designs today, right? But have we taken a step back to adopt that process of agility, right, as against our traditional processes? Once those, for example, the designs are there, have we built an agile manufacturing ecosystem? One doesn't have to manufacture everything on their own to sustain that, right? Is the second question. That's an open question for all of us. People who or companies who are thinking in this direction, in my opinion, will have continued success in the short to medium term. Thank you.
Thanks, Raj. Rajiv, obviously Walmart has over the decades been, in many ways, has pioneered and established a lot of the thinking when it comes to supply chain management, optimization, forecasting, some of the topics we were talking about. But I think some of what Bharati and Raj also touched upon were the complexity of now managing an organization where you've, let's say, got a couple of businesses with different sets of incentives, e-commerce versus the store. You want them to actually work together, but they're either moving at different speeds or have different objectives. So how are you looking at some of these problems in the Walmart context?
Sure. So let me actually take an example of what was just talked about and look at how at Walmart we think about these things, right? So if we actually look at this whole problem around demand and forecasting demand, having an e-commerce platform actually gives us a lot of advantages in terms of understanding based on what the customer intent is, right? Every action or inaction of the customer or on our app or desktop makes us understand what their preferences are. And first, we were able to forecast, like 90% of the US population is within a 10-mile driving distance from one of our stores, right? So first, we were able to forecast at that store catchment in terms of what is the assortment we wanted, like how much of it we wanted, etc. Now, with the power of actually the digital intent being captured, it becomes very easy for us essentially to even at a very, very localized, at a pixel level, right, on how these cab aggregators look at pixel and geocodes, for us to forecast and see what demand is going to be there. And you'll be fairly surprised, even in developed markets, the needs are fairly local, the assortment is fairly local, right? And you're able to capture intent on how much of it will go through the store channel, how much of it will be on national delivery, and all of that based on customer preferences. Now, as we were building this capability, we put on our hat as a marketplace platform. And we said, if we can do it for our retail business, what is it that we can do using signals that we get from the search keywords on our platform, on Google, and a lot of other data that is publicly available, right? In the past, retailers used to kind of go get surveys done and use that data to understand customer preferences. Now, everything is available in a fairly real-time structured manner because of the amount of data that's captured digitally. And what we are able to do is just extend what we were doing for our retail business to solve the top of the funnel problem, which is what is the assortment that is in demand? What's trending? How do we provide those insights to our sellers, the relevant sellers who are selling in that category? Just tell them, intersect that with the kind of traffic that comes on Walmart and give them recommendations on what they want to bring onto our platform and how much. And you'll be very surprised that sellers saw a multifold increase in their GMV through our platform by just subscribing to some of these insights, right? So the way we look at technology is essentially what is the purpose? The purpose was to serve the customer locally, right? And then when we put on our marketplace hat, we wanted to make our sellers successful, right? We wanted to make their assortment more productive. We wanted their businesses to have better top lines and bottom lines. And then you use ML, AI, and technology in the context of that, right? And that becomes very important and you achieve results.
Thanks. I'll, maybe just last question. I want to see if there's a little bit of time to get some from the audience as well. I'll start with you on this, Bharati. I think right at the start we spoke about disruptive new brands, digital natives who are coming, who are now sort of growing, doing interesting things. At the same time, obviously, a lot of the established retailers are also innovating significantly. What are you seeing in terms of the innovation that's happening on both sides right now? What are the most exciting things?
Yeah, definitely on the D2C first brand side, we see them go into multiple channels much faster than I've ever seen before. They're using consumer insights very effectively. So as an example, there's an apparel brand that I think started its first store in 2018, now is at about 100 stores. And every store they open is driven by where their online demand is coming from, right? As an example, and extending on what Rajiv was talking about. With the established brands, I think they underestimate the power of the consumer love that they're sitting on. Okay, I was talking to a very large, very traditional retailer yesterday, and he said, look, we're sitting on 1 crore customer records that we have somehow collected over, many, many years across our franchise stores just by getting phone numbers at the POS, right? And what do you think we should do with it? And you know, a D2C brand would kill to have that. So investing in things like a simple CDP, putting all the data in one place, understanding consumer preferences based on their past purchase history across channels, and then starting to talk to that consumer. Everything is not about a sale, but how you interact with that consumer, because commerce today is so interactive, there's no one-way street. And then finally, we have to talk about ChatGPT, I'm guessing. So I think that's a big trend that's coming. At least at Shopify, we think of it really as, you know, the co-pilot. It's helping our engineers be more productive, do more innovative things, but also we think of it as a co-pilot to merchants. So already we're seeing product descriptions get automated, email titles get automated. If you have an online store, go back today, pick up all the chat transcripts on your Freshdesk or whatever you use for customer support, throw it into ChatGPT and you'll find 5 trends that you didn't know. So this is the future, like using feedback from consumers to inform both the demand and supply side better is here to stay. And both sides are using their strengths very differently, but to the same end result, I think.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. I'll maybe just quickly go around. So, Rajiv, on the question of generative AI, because Bharati brought that up, what are the most interesting applications that you're actually seeing come to life now?
Right. So in retail, the way we're thinking about it, right, and what we feel this will allow the industry to do is, right now, when you go to a retail website, you're searching with keywords, right? The experience, the shopping experience will get a lot more conversational. You will actually converse with platforms. There will be plugins that will be created that will actually allow you to actually talk and be more conversational, and the retailers will actually be able to build your baskets, right? That is definitely going to happen. The second one, again, what we feel is content, right? Retail is also a big content game, and a lot of content enrichment is actually going to happen through the large language models or image enhancements and all of those things. And it'll make it a lot cheaper for retailers to manage content that is so important for them to engage with customers. And then the third one essentially is reducing cognitive load and help take decisions for merchants, supply chain associates, customer service associates, etc. Because you will not need to essentially go and look at things in a structured manner. Stuff will be served to you based on what you need at that point of time, and you'll get what you want. So those are the applications I see in the retail context from a customer and the core business side of things.
Thanks, very helpful. Raj, you brought it up a couple of times, so.
Yeah, so I see a very bright future for large language models in general, especially in the area of product design or prototyping. In terms of content generation, Bharati already covered that. In the area of demand sensing / forecasting, and finally, I also see a lot of leveraging of this, okay, in the area of both pre-sales and post-sales customer support, right? Wherein you'll have much more intelligent assistants out there helping you, helping the customer identify a particular need or throw up ideas, right? As against the conventional mechanism of having, a proper decision tree sort of thing with after 5 questions, we'll say we'll connect you to a human, right? So gone are the days, and I'll see an adoption out there quite early. Thank you.
Thanks, Raj. Ranjan?
I think quickly two areas is what we've been trying to explore, and one of the areas is around customer service, which we all talked about, and then the other area that I foresee where we have started exploring opportunities is around upskilling our people in the stores, because so many people, 3,500 people around the stores, different geographies, it really becomes very difficult to keep them upgraded about the products, and how do you help them to be able to sell better.
Perfect, thanks. That's an interesting new angle. Praveen, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think everybody has covered pretty much what we talked about, which is largely, if you're focusing on, let's say, your top line, bottom line. I would just like to put another dimension here, which we didn't talk about, but I think that's going to be also a key factor when it comes to technology, which is risk reduction. And, whether it's cybersecurity, data privacy regulation, which is coming in a few days' time, and or it is sustainability, right? These are three big drivers which I think may also become major factors in terms of deciding how technology moves forward.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. And I think we're at time. But I think ended on a very optimistic note in terms of I think a lot of excitement around the innovation possibilities, both in terms of engaging with consumers as well as fundamentally how the business itself is run. So thanks, everyone, for sharing all your thoughts.